I'm gonna do something a little different this week, and I'm gonna do this video in two parts just to keep it not too long. It's gonna be long enough on its own. Last week I told a story at the start of my video about two families, one very poor, one very wealthy. The wealthy family had everything. They supplied everything for everybody who was in that family. The poor family had nothing. They were burdened by generations of debt they could never get out from under. The children were born into the debt. Then we saw the only way out was for one of these children to be adopted into by the wealthy man and what brought into the wealthy family. He received, his debts were paid, he received a new name, a new home, a whole new inheritance, a completely new identity. Tonight I want to continue that story and look at what his life looked like after that. So the first few weeks would be incredible. The wealthy family celebrated him. There was a huge feast. Everyone welcomed him in. They bought him beautiful clothes. He had his own room. For the first time in his life, he didn't have to wonder where his next meal would come from. He belonged, he was loved, he was finally home. It was really everything he'd ever dreamed of. But eventually, life became somewhat normal. The big party ended. People went back to work. The excitement settled down a little bit. So one morning he woke up, got dressed in his beautiful new clothes, walked out the front gate, and without even really thinking about it, he went downtown and stood on the street corner and started begging for money. It wasn't even a conscious decision on his part. It was just simply what he'd always done. People walking by recognized him from before and they said, "Here." They tossed him a few coins. Another person handed him some cash. Someone else bought him some lunch. For a few moments, it felt really good. The familiar feeling came rushing back. I've earned something today. I got what I needed. I can take care of myself. But what he found was that good feeling disappeared almost as quickly as it came. By the afternoon, he felt empty. He actually felt worse than he'd ever felt before, because now he was asking for these things he knew he didn't need. He wasn't hungry. He wasn't homeless. He wasn't desperate. Everything he needed had already been provided back at home. So why had he gone back? So he went back home, reset himself, lived with his new belongings and everything. And a few weeks later, the same cycle happened again. But this time he didn't beg, he went out and he borrowed some money. He didn't need it. He simply liked the feeling of having something that was his. So he went and created more debt. For a moment, again, it felt satisfying. Then that emptiness returned almost faster than before. This cycle happens again and again. Sometimes it was begging, sometimes it was borrowing money. Sometimes it's just trying to prove he could make it on his own. But every time he got the same result: temporary satisfaction, lasting emptiness. Finally, one evening, as the guilt started to build of the way he was living his life, he was unable to carry the shame any longer, so he walked home and found the father of the wealthy family sitting on the porch. Before the father could say anything, the boy just burst into tears. He says, "I'm sorry, I did it again. I borrowed money today. I didn't need it. I don't know why I keep doing this." Then he lowered his head and said, "I'm not worthy to be your son anymore." The father just looked at him quietly, then he smiled. He said, "My son, when I paid your debt, I paid all of it. I paid the debt you had. I paid the debt you would create. There isn't a debt you could ever bring home that I haven't already planned for." So at this, the boy was a little bit confused. The father continued, "Do you think I adopted you because I thought you'd never fail? I knew exactly who I was bringing home. I knew every habit, every fear, every way of thinking you had. I knew all of it, and I loved you anyway." The boy began to cry even harder. Oddly enough, this actually almost made him feel worse. Part of him wished the father would just simply yell at him, punish him, make him earn his way back. At least then his guilt would make some sense. Instead, the father simply wrapped his arms around him and said, "I haven't stopped loving you, not for 1 second." Then the father asked a question. He said, "My son, why did you borrow money today?" The boy simply said, "I don't know. I guess it's just what I've always done." The father looked at him and said, "I know." Then the father pointed to the enormous estate that was surrounding him. He said, "My son, everything here is yours. My pantry is your pantry. My table is your table. My home is your home. My inheritance is your inheritance. You no longer need to live like someone trying to survive. You are no longer surviving. You belong." The boy just sat silently. Then the father said something he would never forget. He said, "You keep going back because your body remembers your old life, but your old life no longer fits who you are. Begging never gave you life. You only thought it did. It simply kept you alive long enough to make it here. But now you have a father, you have a home, you have everything you'll ever need. The question isn't whether you're my son. That's been settled. The question is, when will you begin living like my son? The boy looked down at his expensive clothes. Then he looked at the few borrowed coins still clutched tightly in his hand. For the first time, he realized something. The coins weren't the problem. The begging wasn't even the problem. The real problem was that he still thought like someone who belonged on the streets. He had entered a new family, but he was still living from his old identity. And until he truly believed that his old life was gone, he would keep returning to habits that could never satisfy him again. Not because the habits had changed, but because he had. As I think on that story, think of a question. What if the greatest struggle in our Christian life isn't that God keeps forgiving the same failures over and over again, but that we keep returning to an identity that no longer belongs to us? What if we've been trying to satisfy needs that the Father has already completely provided for? Next video, tomorrow night, we're going to open up Romans 6, and Paul's going to ask a question that really changes everything when it comes to identity. Because the answer is never simply try harder. The answer is discovering who you really are. And we're going to get to that tomorrow as we dive into some scripture.